You ever feel like you're just missing the instruction manual for life? Like there's a more centered, more powerful version of yourself just waiting to be unlocked? Well, that's what we're diving into today. Think of this as an operator's manual for the male psyche. We're going on a journey to understand maybe the most central and powerful archetype of them all, the king. And no, this isn't about ancient rulers with crowns and castles. It's about a core energy inside every one of us that when we finally get it, can lead to a much more centered and, generative life.
So that really brings us to the big question, right? What makes a great king? And I don't mean someone sitting on a throne. I mean, what does it actually take to embody that calm, authoritative, life-giving energy in your world? Whether that's your family, your career, or just your own inner life. Answering that? Well, that's the whole quest of our explainer today.
So, here's how we're going to break it down. We've got 5 stages. Think of it like a character's journey in a video game. We start with the call to manhood. That's the call to action. Then we look at the starting level, the immature prince. After that, we'll explore the main quest objective, the king in fullness. Of course, we have to look at the pitfalls, the dangers along the way, in the shadow of the throne. And finally, we'll get to the practical stuff, how we can actually start wearing the crown in our own lives.
Okay, first up, the call to manhood. Look, in our modern world, it's really easy to feel lost, right? Traditional roles and identities are all up in the air, but here's the thing. Psychology tells us that deep down, inside our own minds, we already have these blueprints for maturity. These aren't things you learn in school. They're innate. The famous psychologist Carl Jung called them archetypes, and they're basically our guide map for this entire journey.
So what exactly is an archetype? It sounds complicated, but it's not. Think of it like this. A brand new duckling is hardwired to look for a caretaker. Nobody has to teach it what a mother is. That instinct is just there. Well, in the same way, we are all born with the hardwiring for these incredibly powerful inner figures, like the king. They are the psychic foundations of pretty much our entire human experience.
So how does this map help us on our quest? Well, here's the reality check. We don't start the game as the king. No, we start with his precursor, the prince. This is the realm of what psychologists call boys' psychology. It's where we find the immature, kind of undeveloped seeds of all this powerful energy. This is our character's starting point, level 1.
And this diagram here, it illustrates the whole structure perfectly. You can see how the potential for the king actually begins as this archetype of the divine child. Now, at the very top of that triangle, that's its healthy expression. But down at the bottom, you find its 2 shadow poles. These are the immature, dysfunctional ways this energy can show up before it has a chance to mature. And understanding these 2 shadows is absolutely crucial. On one side, you have the active shadow, the high chair tyrant. This is basically the screaming toddler inside a grown man's body, banging a spoon on the table, demanding the world cater to his every whim. Then on the other side, you have the passive shadow, the weakling prince. This guy avoids responsibility, seems kind of dull and out of it, and hides his own secret grandiosity behind a wall of doing nothing at all.
This quote really just nails the problem with this immature shadow. I mean, the high chair tyrant is so wrapped up in his own bottomless demands that he ends up pushing away the very things he desperately needs to grow. The nurturing, the support, the love. It's a completely self-sabotaging loop.
Okay, so if the prince is where we start, where are we trying to go? We're heading for the king in his fullness. This is the expression of a mature, centered masculine energy. The king, when he's fully realized, acts like a conduit, a bridge, between the sacred world of ideals and the human world of action. This is the character we're trying to build, the one we're aiming to become.
Now, the fully realized king has 2 primary jobs, 2 core abilities, if you will. First, he has to provide order. This means creating clear, stable boundaries that give a feeling of safety and structure. It doesn't matter if that kingdom is a country, a company, or your own family. Second, he provides blessing. This is the life-giving, generative part of it all, fostering growth, creativity, and genuinely seeing and affirming the worth in other people.
And this isn't just some abstract mythical stuff. Not at all. This energy shows up in the real world every single day. A true king creates boundaries. He lives by a code. But he also recognizes the worth of his people. And that very same energy is what gets a father to his son's piano recital, what helps a boss confront an employee with integrity, and what drives a person to fight for their family's future. It's all about bringing that order and that blessing into your own personal realm.
You see this theme everywhere in our stories. It's universal. Think about it. When Simba finally returns to Pride Rock in The Lion King, the rains come back, and the land heals.
When Aragorn takes the throne in Gondor, the dead white tree suddenly blossoms again. It's simple. When the true king is present and centered, the realm, whether it's inside you or outside in the world, it thrives.
But what happens when this incredibly powerful energy is misused? What happens when a man doesn't embody the king, but is instead possessed by it? Well, that's when we fall into the shadow of the throne. This is the corrupted version of our archetype, the bad guy in our story.
And if we go back to our diagram, we see the exact same pattern as before. Just like the prince, the mature king archetype also has this bipolar shadow system. The active shadow is the tyrant, and the passive shadow is the weakling. These are the two primary ways a king can fail his kingdom and ultimately fail himself.
The difference between these two is just stark. The tyrant actively abuses his power. He's paranoid, he's cruel, and he sees any new life or new idea as a direct threat to his very fragile rule. The weakling, on the other hand, he just gives up his power completely. He lacks any inner authority and just projects his responsibility onto someone else, a spouse, a boss, a political leader, and lets chaos take over. Both paths are a total disaster.
This is such a perfect modern example, right? Scar is the classic tyrant. He rules Pride Rock with fear and intimidation, but all of it comes from this place of deep, deep insecurity. He lives in constant terror that the true king, Simba, is going to come back. And historically, you see this exact same pattern in guys like King Herod or the Emperor Caligula, people who became gods in their own minds and ended up destroying everyone around them.
So, we've mapped out the whole journey, from the immature prince, through all the corrupted shadows, all the way to the mature king. Now we get to the most important part. How do we actually do this? How do we cultivate this positive, generative energy in our own lives? How do we start wearing the crown responsibly? This is the practical, hands-on part of our quest.
And thankfully, there's a pretty clear path we can follow. First, critical self-appraisal. You have to humbly ask yourself, how does the tyrant or the weakling show up in my behavior? Second, you have to have a dialogue with these inner energies. Treat them like members of a board meeting and actually listen to what they have to say. Third, admire men who embody the king. Study them, learn from them. And finally, if you just can't feel it yet, act as if. Begin by acting like the calm, centered king you want to become, and you'd be surprised how often the feeling will follow the action.
But what's the foundation for all of this growth? What's the secret ingredient? It really comes down to one thing: humility. And I'm not talking about humiliation. True humility is just about having an honest view of yourself, knowing your limitations, and this is the crucial part, being willing to get the help you need to overcome them. It's the key that turns the lock from boy psychology to man psychology.
In this idea of being a servant, it reveals the ultimate difference between a true king and a tyrant. See, the tyrant identifies with the power. He thinks he is the crown. A great king, he understands he's just a temporary steward of that energy. He serves something bigger than his own ego, his people, his principles, a higher power. He knows he's mortal, but the role itself is eternal.
So we end right where we began, but now the question is really for you. That call to embody this centered, generative, ordered energy, it's always there. It's always present. And now that you've seen the map, the journey from prince to king, with all of its shadows and all of its potential, the only question left is, how will you answer that call in your own life?